The Bluebird of Happiness. The concert was a rousing success. Aurora sang beautiful songs that made people sigh with wonder, sad songs that made people weep for things that were never real, and almost bawdy, funny songs to bring them back from the brink. When she sang the Raven of the Evercliffs, she looked at Liana. Her handmaiden's eyes remained wide and unblinking for the entire song. As a surprise encore, a little servant boy sang a simple country ballad that had everyone clapping and shouting. Aurora held him high in her arms so the whole crowd could see. For one evening at least, everyone was happy again. There was a little bit of a hope in the Thorn Castle once more, enough to see them through to the next ball. Even Maleficent seemed cheered. All this strengthened Aurora's new resolve, and crystallized her intentions. She came up with a plan. A plan to improve herself, to keep herself busy, like Lady Astrid, to make what was left of the world better for those around her, like Liana. The plan was this. Each month she would work on one quality she felt she was lacking in until she was a better person. First was gratitude, next was patience, after that was pure thoughts. She made lots of wonderful little lists, chock full of ideas for exercising each deficient part of her psyche. It was much easier than maths. One of her first to-dos for gratitude was to give a thank-you speech at the Gold Ball as a surprise for her aunt. "And we thank you, gracious Queen." Aurora held the carefully penned speech in her right hand, and moved her left hand across her body, indicating an imaginary crowd. It didn't feel right. She should be gesturing at the Queen, not the audience. Or maybe she just emphasized the we. "We thank you, gracious Queen, for our safety, our health, our well-being, our very lives. Without your foresight and kindness, we would be as dead as the world around us, and extinct as the rabbits." She faltered on that word. She tried not to think about the playing card with the tender brown-furred thing lifting its nose to the golden-haired girl, who resembled her so closely. She tried not to think about what the animal would have looked like in real life, whether it was really that friendly, if its fur was soft, if its nose twitched or stayed still. "Extinct as the rabbits," she began again, taking a breath, "for—" A movement flickered at the edge of her vision. At the base of her desk, next to one of the long legs that ended ironically in paws, there, of course, was a rabbit. Somehow she had known what it was before she even made herself look at it. And now that she had, she felt her heart beating out of control, her breath catching in her throat. It looked both exactly and not at all like the picture. Its eyes were brown, large and glistening, and mostly empty. It leaned forwards hesitantly to sniff the leg of the desk, putting its whiskers and silly long ears back. It turned its head to look directly at Aurora. It had no tail, only a stupidly endearing puff of white on its rear end. "You're not real," Aurora said, hopefully and doubtingly. "You're extinct." The rabbit cocked its head and turned its ears like a windmill. If she hadn't known better, she would have thought its face showed the animal equivalent of a smile. Oh, she wanted to touch it. She wanted to bend down and put her hand out the way she did to the few baby goats and sheep that were born to the castle each year. She wanted to be the girl in the picture and have it breathe its warm, moist breath on the palm of her hand. She thought of Maleficent's words about the outside finding unexpected ways into the castle, about the implication that she was weaker than most in this respect because of her parents, because of her tainted evil blood. Aurora closed her eyes. "You're not real." When she opened them, the rabbit was gone. What she felt then had nothing to do with relief or thankfulness. It was as if all of her little stores of energy, of hope, of happiness, were now suddenly being forcefully drained from her into the floor. She let the speech drop in a sad flutter, and lay down on her bed, too empty to do anything else. Liana was starting to worry about Aurora. She even tried to arrange a tryst between the princess and Kale. Difficult, because he couldn't read the notes she sent. Aurora just didn't care that much. The stable boy would always be there. He would be there next month if she cared by then, and so would the ball, and so would the musicians, and the food, and then there would be another month. Besides, stable boys are no fit match for a royal princess, Aurora said aloud, imitating Maleficent's voice in dramatic speech. She sat alone at her desk, playing with her tiny pile of illicit treasures, the 3 cards she had managed to keep, and the blue feather, instead of working on maths or her lists. They were all dirty and work with animals and live outside, and she stopped. It wasn't to wonder, as she occasionally did, who would be a fit match, since all the princes in the world were dead. No, it was a murky, intriguing thought involving stable boys and animals. She picked up the feather regarding it. Lady Ashford was right. She couldn't talk to anyone about it inside the castle. The old lady had said it very specifically and carefully. The stable boy was not inside the castle. He lived in the stable, in the bailey, and he knew something about animals. Birds, maybe. This was an interesting idea, an idea that actually involved doing something, an action of some sort, which was where things usually fell apart for Aurora. Actions were tiring. She mostly found it better to lie on her bed and think about actions. Just the thought of getting up these days seemed exhausting and unreasonable. Sometimes she had to surprise her body into doing something. So without thinking, she leapt off the bed and fastened her chatelaine to her girdle. She hurried to find Liana before she could find some reason to change her own mind. The handmaiden was sitting in front of a woodless magical fire, just staring into it, warming her hands, which would have been odd if Aurora didn't know that she came from a hot country. I think I'd like to have a word with the stable boy after all, Aurora said. It wasn't a lie. But she still felt guilty when the usually impassive Liana leapt up immediately, joy and mischief in her big black eyes. "We'll go out to the summer kitchen," she said, clasping the princess's hands in her own. "Come, when we get down to the outer courtyard, I'll run ahead and prepare the way. We'll say just visiting the animals, as you love to do." The two girls hurried through the passageways, hand in hand. When a stolid-looking matron of the lesser nobility rounded a corner, the girls immediately slowed down to a more decorous pace, nodding serenely at the woman. As soon as she was out of sight, they raced ahead again. "Wait here. I'll wave to you from the dairy window when it's safe," Liana said at the door before the courtyard. She started to open it and then stopped and turned, suddenly seized with conscience. "Whatever you do, do not do anything that would shame yourself. He is just a stable boy." Aurora smiled. "I plan on just talking. Thank you for your concern, though." She squeezed Liana's arm. "You are such a good friend." The girl cocked her head at Aurora with an unreadable expression. The princess could not help being reminded of the imaginary rabbit she had seen. Then Liana was off through the dark greenish-black murk of the courtyard. It wasn't long before her head popped up across the way, and she waved her hand frantically like a little child. Aurora waved back and stepped through the door. She didn't like leaving the castle. Only the prospect of petting animals could draw her out. Despite her longing for sun and sky and freedom, she felt safer under mountains of cold grey rock. Inside you could almost forget there was an outside, that anything had happened to that outside. In the courtyards and bailey there were no possibility of forgetting. Giant black and green vines, some as wide as a man was tall, arched up overhead from beyond the castle walls. They twined and joined and wove themselves in strangely nauseating patterns. Humongous thorns, some the size of swords, clasped and gouged and held the vines together, the plant's skin puckered where they pierced, almost like it was painful. A few thin, unhealthy-looking leaves decorated the undersides of the largest branches, as if they were merely an afterthought in the monstrous plants. The whole bailey and all the courtyards were bathed in a perpetual twilight. On good days it was shot through by narrow beams of sun, but even those seemed sickly by the time they reached the ground. The peasants had managed to arrange long, thin, unhappy-looking gardens that traced along the route of the feeble light that made its way through. Aurora hurried as daintily as she could, trying not to close her eyes. She wrapped her shawl tightly around her. One peasant had been killed by a falling thorn. As soon as she was under the overhang of the stable, at one time necessary when clean rain fell freely from the sky, she breathed deeply. Royal princesses were not supposed to show fear, but only when she was under cover of a real shadow from solid dead wood and stone walls, and enveloped with moisture from cool dark interiors, and the breath of animals within, did she feel safe. Once recovered, she turned to pet the nag Fala, who was old when the world was destroyed. Even the stoniest-hearted peasant wouldn't think of putting her down now. Aurora kissed the horse's warm nose, and stroked the muzzle below her blind eyes. Then slowly, as if it was something she was just attending to, she went into the stable itself. It smelled strongly of strange magicked hay, of horse and cow dung, of leather and oils and humans who didn't bathe as often as a royal princess. She didn't mind. "Your Highness!" Kell came forwards out of the gloom, no longer wearing his borrowed finery. In a loose tunic and carefully bound-up ancient leggings, he still cut just as handsome a figure. In his own territory he certainly had more swagger and braggadocio. "Cale," Aurora said, tipping her chin gently, "if this was an actual, illegal, unsanctioned tryst, What would come next? Would it end with him trying to kiss her? Would she pull him into a clean pile of hay as she heard some of the serving girls whisper about? "How may I be of service?" he asked, a twinkle in his eye. "It's not the best weather for a ride around the kingdom today, I'm afraid. What with the monsters and demons and everything being dead and all." "Yes, I am aware of the present circumstances of the world we live in. I came to ask you a question. What is this?" She took the feather out of the silver pouch on her chatelaine and held it up. "Why, it's a feather, your highness," Kale started to joke. Then he stopped, suddenly peering at it harder. He took it from her without asking. Aurora saw the intrigued look in his eye. "Well, smack my flanks! It's a bluebird feather. Wherever did you get it?" "How did you know it's from a bluebird?" she asked, ignoring his question. "I'm a few seasons older than you," he said, touching his forelock in a sort of salute. "My memories are still cloudy, like all of us, but when I was a babe I remember being left outside on my own with my siblings, supposing to care for me, and heal a bird for my lunch. Birds would come and peck at my crumbs. Sparrows and others, and even a couple of these feathers, as blue as the sky on a winter's day." Aurora listened to his story with wonder. Imagine having birds as playmates. "May I ask where you got this, your highness? It doesn't look like it's from a hat or a pin or a cloak. It's too small and not crushed at all." "I don't think I can reveal that," she said slowly, taking it back. "Oh, aye," the sable boy said slowly. "But if it's from outside—" Aurora looked at him sharply. "Begging your pardon," the boy mumbled, looking down, suddenly seeming years younger. "It would just be a miracle, a godsend, to know there's still bluebirds out there." Aurora felt herself melt. Here she was feeling caged and useless, a princess who spent her whole life inside castle walls, and there he was, one of the many who had lived most of their lives outside. Those who knew what they were missing, even if they couldn't precisely remember it, who had, in some ways, lost far more than she had. She reached out and clasped his hand. He looked at her surprised. "On my honor, as soon as I work out this little mystery, I shall let you in on it," she promised. "As soon as I hear word about the safety of going outside, I will let you know, myself." "Thank you, your highness," he stammered. He offered her a spontaneous, jerky bow. "Good day, Kale," she said with a royal nod of her head. "Good day to you, your highness," he said solemnly back. "You're as wise and kind as you are beautiful." The glow that rose up on her cheeks warmed her on the walk back to the castle. He might not have been her favourite boy in the castle, but he was a boy, and it felt nice. A strange, quick hissing noise caused her to look up. Liana was standing, otherwise motionless, near the door of the summer kitchen, a basket over one arm as if she had been intending to do something useful. Two bothersome, gossipy girls stood with her, none other than Mistress Laura herself, and her chaperone, the only slightly older Lady Mulder. Neither had seen the princess yet. Liana shook her head very slightly. Aurora could not return to the castle that way. The princess bit her lip and quickly dashed to the stone wall, pressing herself up against it as closely as she dared without ruining her dress. The next entrance was all the way round the side, where the chambermaids went to empty the pots, and the cooks tossed the offal. It stank, but no one would see her there. She hurried as carefully as she could, holding the train of her dress high out of the dust. As she rounded the corner, she saw one of Maleficent's servants nosing around the door. Off duty? Did they even go off duty? It was on its knees and hands, snuffling in the midden like an animal. Aurora had to turn her head when it found a length of entrails and worried it out of the pile, stretching it until the tube of flesh snapped. Holding her nose and gagging, she slipped past it. The last entrance, so it was unlikely to be guarded, was a once-upon-a-time secret passage for quick escape in case of invasion. Almost everyone knew about it now. There was few secrets left in the remaining population, but it was rarely used because the stairs were slippery, the tunnels dark and damp, and they led right past the chamber where King Stefan and Queen Leah were imprisoned. The princess pulled aside what looked like a set of heavy rain barrels and stepped reluctantly into the dripping holes they revealed. She descended slowly, almost slipping twice on the first few steps and jarring her head badly. She cursed, using a word she had heard Kale use once, and found it did make her feel a bit better. The way ahead was pitch black, but there was no way she could get lost. There was only one way to go, and she kept telling herself this as she moved slowly along, her hand on each slimy wall to steady herself. She tried to distract herself with the important thing she had just learned, that the feather was from a bluebird, a bird that only existed on the outside. An outside that was supposed to be a wasteland, devoid of all but the most noxious and evil life. An outside that the minstrel had apparently escaped to and returned from, not entirely worse for wear. But was there still a possibility that he was just drunk and mad? They had simply found a feather somewhere and concocted this crazy story? Well, then life would go on as it had. But if he really had been outside, and things did live there. The princess picked up the hem of her skirt as she stepped delicately over a pool of muck. There was a little light now that reached her from the flickering torches in the dungeon proper. She swung against the far wall to the stairs on the other side, unwilling to see or be seen by the prisoners. And then she heard voices. Her aunt's voice. And her parents'? She slowed down and pressed herself against the cool black wall to listen and watch. "Oh, enough already," Maleficent said, with a tired though dramatic wave of her arms. "There is no way out. You will eventually die, and I shall live again." "But our daughter," the old queen said, coming forwards and holding the bars. It almost sounded like she cared. "Your daughter?" Maleficent asked, her voice rising in dramatic surprise. "Really? What kind of loving mother hands her daughter off to the fairies for 16 years? Aurora frowned. That was wrong. She was to be given to the fairies on her 16th year, not for 16 years. "It was to protect her," King Stefan protested. "Really?" Maleficent swung around, arching her arms and fingers like an animal, lowering her yellow eyes to their level. "You couldn't think of any other way to protect your daughter? Better guards, higher walls, runes and spells inside the castle? Really? Let me tell you something, dearies." She lowered her voice and spoke with a hiss through lips that barely moved. "You may think I'm more evil than any demon who ever walked this earth, and you may be right. But if I ever had a daughter, you can be sure I would keep her close and teach her well, and school her in the arts of magic, and make her strong and powerful enough to protect herself, and I would never let anything come between us." Aurora felt something strange inside her. Maleficent was never this uncontrolled, this furious. Her words rang somehow truer now than in all of her carefully composed dramatic speeches. Or, Maleficent recovered herself. She straightened back up to her full height and adjusted her cloak. "Or admit the truth to yourselves. It didn't matter much either way, because in the end, you really would have preferred a son." And with that she spun out and strode out the dungeon. Aurora was so confused she didn't bother trying to hide herself. Her aunt almost tripped over her. "Aurora," she said in her normal voice, faintly surprised. "What are you doing here?" I was playing a game of hide-and-seek with some of the servant children," she stammered. She had never lied to Maleficent before, but overhearing that conversation had unnerved her. "Oh," her aunt said, accepting her explanation, but still confused. "That's rather gracious of you, my dear. I wouldn't encourage them to hide down here, however, lest they come under the evil spell of your parents. Or the minstrel," Aurora added quickly, relieved her lie was taken up so quickly. "The minstrel? He's not down here. But he's not near the stockade, so I assumed—" "Oh." Maleficent's face fell into a mask of sadness. "He's gone, darling. Apparently the poor drunken fool actually did make it outside somehow. I thought it was just his usual drunken ramblings." "What?" She just barely caught herself from adding, "So it's true." Maleficent regarded her with intelligent, unreadable eyes. "Outside and back in over a month ago. I just found out the truth of it myself. I have no idea how he did it. There's a hole in the security somewhere. I must recast my spells and protections. Who knows what he could have brought in with him?" "Where is he now?" Aurora breathed, thinking of her feather. "Back outside, where he so desperately wanted to be. For good this time. I didn't stop him." Aurora felt like throwing up. Her head hurt. She had the feather. Should she tell her aunt? Tears sprang to her eyes. Maleficent misunderstood, reaching out to pat her on the shoulder. "Darling, don't overmourn. His time wasn't long here anyway, the way he was living. But, and this is important, you must never talk about this with anyone. People get funny, wrong ideas. There is nothing outside. Nothing that will keep you alive for long. We don't want anyone starting rumors." She pulled her cloak around her and started to go. "Aunt," Aurora began, not sure what she was going to say. That mention of everything? Something about the minstrel, something about a feather, questions about outside. But that's not what came out. "What if I could do it? What if I could learn magic? Would you teach me your powers? Would you raise me to be like you? And we could rule the world together, maybe make it back to like it once was, before my parents destroyed it, together? Maleficent blinked at her once with her slow yellow eyes. Perhaps the first time ever, an ironic remark, a dramatic observation, a meaningless quip didn't form on her lips. She seemed uncomfortable thinking about the question, and twitched her shoulders. "But you can't," she finally said. "You're just not capable, dear." And she swept up the stairs, her cape trailing out majestically behind her. Aurora sank down on the cold stones. She didn't go down to confront her parents. She didn't go up. She stayed in the comforting darkness, and wept over things she couldn't even name.